from this time and forevermore. Blessed be the name of the Lord.
Jesus said in John chapter 3, verses 7 through 8, "Do not marvel that I said to you, you must be born again. The wind blows where it wishes, and you hear the sound of it, but you do not know where it comes from and where it is going. So is everyone who is born of the Spirit." The analogy of the wind is very interesting here. It presents the concept of hearing something but not being able to see it. Usually, Bible students apply this analogy to the process of being born again. On the surface, that seems to be the point, especially when you realize that the Greek word for spirit can actually be translated wind. So is it a play on words? Probably so, but not in an attempt to apply the wind to how the Spirit saves someone. Jesus specifically tells us how to apply the analogy. He says, "So is everyone who is born of the Spirit." Notice that it is applied to the state of the person who is born of the Spirit, not the activity of the Spirit changing their state. Let me illustrate this in two ways. First, in the natural birth, you can see the process at work. On top of that, you can tell who the parents are. The Jews knew this all too well and were very keen on keeping track of who was born of whom. Nicodemus could cite his forebears back for at least several generations, I'm sure. And that was important to him being who he was, a ruler of the Jews. Being born of the Spirit is not a physical process where you can watch, point out to others, or even issue a birth certificate. Only God knows for certain if the inner change took place. Secondly, I might illustrate this with the Apostle Paul. Do you have any doubt about his having been born of the Spirit? I don't, and I'm sure you don't. But look at Acts 9, verses 26 through 27. Referring to Paul, Luke tells us, "And when he had come to Jerusalem, he was trying to associate with the disciples, and they were all afraid of him, not believing that he was a disciple. But Barnabas took hold of him and brought him to the apostles and described to them how he had seen the Lord on the road, and that he had talked to him, and how at Damascus he had spoken out boldly in the name of Jesus." The disciples couldn't look at Paul and know that he also was now a disciple. But now we need to get to the fullness of this analogy. While the wind cannot be seen, the effect of the wind can. The change that eventuates will undoubtedly be seen in the life of the person. They will put away the works of the flesh. The way they talk, the way they dress, the way they act will all be affected by the laws of Christ's kingdom rather than the kingdom of darkness. Could they be faking? Yeah. But that's beside the point in this discussion. Jesus is telling Nicodemus that this new birth isn't like the physical birth in that you can't watch it taking place. However, it does have a visible effect. Nicodemus would see it over and over in disciples as they refused to give in to the persecution and would even die for their king. Everyone born of the Spirit will be like the wind. From the unseen reaches of their minds, they have yielded to Jesus, and you see it moving them in obedience to the new king. That isn't mysterious. Jesus expected Nicodemus to understand that. Nicodemus asked in verse 9, "How can these things be?" Jesus answered and said to him, "Are you the teacher of Israel and do not understand these things?" He isn't making fun of Nicodemus. The analogy was a comprehensible and understandable illustration intended to be understood. And then people turn around and call it a mystery we can't understand. Listen to Jesus. He has expected an understanding of his insight into these things and rebukes Nicodemus for not receiving what he has borne witness to. Jesus used earthly things so Nicodemus could understand, and he points out that if he had wanted to, He could have made it impossible for Nicodemus to understand. But Jesus didn't. He made it understandable. The problem was that Nicodemus wanted the whole process to revolve around being a Jew. That wasn't God's plan, and I am so glad, because I'm a Gentile, and I need to be a fellow citizen in the kingdom of Christ. I too had to be born again. Now, did you ever notice that the most famous verse in the Bible is in this context of being born again? Next week, we'll tie all of this into John 3:16.